I stood in the courtroom under lights that made the varnish glow and the truth look clinical. On the screen, my name sat in bold beside a line I had never written: Margaret Hale, 51% owner. Beneath it, a text bubble from my daughter-in-law read, "Only veterans are eligible." The judge slid his glasses down his nose and peered at me over the rims like a man looking across a fence. "Mrs. Hale," he asked, "did you authorize this filing?" Somewhere behind me a suit coughed. Somewhere inside me something old and steel-colored clicked into place. I lifted my chin, not high, just steady the way we were taught, save your voice for the sentence that matters. 7 days earlier, my house smelled like lemon oil and pot roast. Tara sat on the couch I bought and smirked the way some people breathe. "You're just a washed-up vet mom," she said, pulling vet like taffy until it lost its shape. My son Eric nodded along without lifting his eyes from his phone. The Sunday crawl at the bottom of my TV announced gas prices, a marching band headed to state, and cold rain sweeping in from Indiana. On the back of a dining chair hung a pale pink dress I'd bought months ago for when the wedding planning gets real. The tag was still on it. I kept forgetting to return it, which is another way of saying I kept hoping. If you ask people in Springfield what Sunday feels like, they'll say soft. Choir folders under arms, crockpots on towels, the hiss of an iron across slacks you only wear to funerals and appointments. I'd brought home leftover scalloped potatoes from the church kitchen I helped clean and set my table anyway. The good plates, the cloth napkins, I still fold into rectangles because triangles feel like showing off. Hospitality is a habit. You keep doing it even when it's uninvited. Washed up, I repeated, not to fight, but to weigh the word in my own mouth. It didn't crack. I managed a small private smile, the sort you learn in uniform when a private is puffed up and you decide not to spend a perfectly good breath. "Well," I said, "washed up still makes a decent pot roast." "We're keto this week," Tara said, flicking a crumb off the cushion with a manicure I probably financed. Eric huffed a laugh that landed on the carpet and died there. He's been nodding to keep the peace since he was 10. 35, and still nodding. On the shelf by my stove sit 2 metal boxes. One is blue and holds recipe cards in my late husband's handwriting, Robert's Ribs Sunday Chili Lemon Bars for bake sales. The other is green and dented and holds my service a DD-214, a snapshot of me in BDUs with a sunburned grin, a thin stack of commendations that never asked to be framed. I keep the boxes together. Maybe that's sentiment. Maybe it's symmetry. Either way, it tells the truth. I have fed people one way or another my whole life. The sun slid behind the maple across the street, and the house entered that early evening hush like it was trying not to wake a baby. Tara scrolled through shows, her reflection a faint ghost in the black of the screen between episodes. Eric paced the hallway, then stopped, because pacing looks too much like deciding. I washed the good plates, dried them until they squeaked, and slid them into the cabinet like filing memories. If you expected a shouting match, you've never managed a supply room during a snowstorm. You save your breath. You listen. Information likes quiet. I didn't throw anyone out. I didn't lecture. I let the evening be small. Later they left with my Tupperware and a handful of promises I had stopped believing. After the door closed, I sat on the edge of my bed and scrolled through pictures labeled Small Ceremony. Tara's parents stood shoulder to shoulder with the bride and groom, beaming like pride was oxygen. Her brother held up a champagne flute. His tie matched the flowers. Eric smiled the way he did at 10 when he thought I could fix anything with duct tape and a hug. And there I wasn't. The caption under one photo said, "Only special people." I lay back in my housecoat and stared at the ceiling until the plaster swam. Loneliness can feel like the church hall after a potluck chairs, folded warming trays, cooling conversation stitched into the corners, so faint you're not sure you imagined it. I did what logistics teaches I counted. Rent at $500 a month for 3 years, $18,000. Groceries and personal items call it $200 a month for 36 months, $700 to $200. Tires when cords showed $600 to $40. The gray sectional Tara said the old floral made her itchy, $1, $100. A car repair during the January cold snap, $890. A bridge loan I'd never see again, $2,500. Birthday things, Christmas things, just because things I stopped at $33,000 and told myself arithmetic is not therapy. The phone rang the next day and the day after that. I let it go to voicemail both times. I baked 2 loaves of banana bread and carried one to Ellen next door because the quiet in my kitchen had started to lean. We sat at her table with the checkered oilcloth and talked about tomatoes that saw frost, and the new mail carrier who leaves packages like he's apologizing to the porch. I did not say special people out loud. Saying a thing turns it into furniture. Back home, I put the second loaf on my counter and wrote Eric on a sticky note. I stared at the letters, peeled the note off, and dropped it in the trash. Old habits don't die. You assign them a shelf and check them once a month until you can let them go. That night, I slept badly. At 2 a.m., I padded to the kitchen, pulled down the green box, and opened the lid. Paper smells like attic air when it's been kept long enough. I ran a finger over my service dates, 1976, 1998. People hear logistics and think clipboards. I think of getting supplies through when I-70 iced over and closed 12 hours. I think of knowing which bolt holds a gate together when the pin goes missing, and someone's counting on that gate to open. I think of doing the math right because lives are what balance on the other side of the equal sign. Washed up, I whispered, and for the first time it felt like a joke I was finally in on. Washed up means you were once in the water. I slid the form back, closed the lid, and stood there a minute with my palm on the cool metal. Then I brewed tea strong enough to convince a cat to take a bath and sat at the table with my legal pad. I wrote the date. I wrote 2 words, special people. I drew a small square beside them the way we used to draw check boxes for incoming pallets. Boxes make choices visible. Morning came honest and bright. I ironed a clean blouse and sang a hymn to no one. Somewhere a truck downshifted, somewhere a dog barked, because dogs believe in duty. I set my phone face down and waited for the kettle to rattle. When it did, I poured sat and lined up my pen with the edge of the pad. The empty square waited without judgment. On the 3rd ring, I picked up. Tara's voice was sweet in a way sugar wishes it could manage. "Hi, Mom. Do you have a minute?" "Go ahead," I said. So tiny thing, she began the way people do when they're about to ask for something that isn't tiny. "There's this opportunity at the city market vendor stalls, but only veterans are eligible to be the owner on paper. We figured since you're, Across the table, the box beside special people waited empty. In another version of my life, the one with the pink dress and a photo where I stood between them, I might have checked it without thinking. In this one, I heard the hum of a courthouse air vent I hadn't met yet and felt a brass unit coin ghost my palm. A supply truck somewhere in the week ahead eased toward a dock, and I decided I would be standing there when it arrived. Clipboard, ready voice, saved for the single sentence that matters. I didn't give her my answer, not yet. "We'll talk," I said, and set the pen down. Outside, the maple let go of one red leaf. It fell like a slow yes I hadn't asked for but might use when it counted. The call came the next afternoon, while pot roast leftovers cooled. I wiped my hands, let it ring once, then picked up. "Mom, do you have a second?" Tara's cheerfulness had the shape of a favor. Eric's voice bled in. "We're both here." "Go ahead," I said, hit speaker, and slid my yellow legal pad closer. When someone wants a signature, I like my hands free. "This is nothing big," Tara said, which is what people say when it is. "There's a program downtown for the city market reduced fee stalls. Only veterans are eligible to own on paper. You'd be 51%. You wouldn't have to do anything. We'd run it." "On paper," I repeated, because words do tricks when they're not nailed down. I wrote the date and time. What does the application ask for? "Basic stuff," Eric said. "Your DD-214 veteran ID, a signature. They don't really check as long as the owner is technically a vet." "Who's the accountant?" I asked. "What's your EIN product list hours? Who carries liability? And how do we split losses if you take a bath?" Silence the kind that wants you to fill it with yes. Tara inhaled. "Mom, you're making this complicated. We figured you'd be proud to have your service on the paperwork. It helps families, it helps us, and it helps you too." "How does it help me?" I asked. Not mean just labeling shelves correctly. "Well," Eric said, earnest, "we talked to a lender about a condo. Veterans get friendlier terms. You could be on the pre-approval just technically. You wouldn't have to live there. You could just say you will at first. Then we'd refinance later. It's how people do it. There it was. The part you can't afford to pretend you didn't hear. You want me to say I'll occupy when I won't, I said. That isn't how people do it. That's misrepresentation. Mom Tara said sweetness turning granular, this is us. Family. We'd never put you at risk. Who drafted your LLC, I asked. If I'm 51% on paper, where does it say my control matches my responsibility? When the health inspector shuts you down and rent still comes due, who decides I let the steam from my tea fog my glasses? It's nice when you can hide behind practicalities instead of feelings. Can we not lawyer this to death, Eric said, that old 12-year-old whine, sneaking into the adult voice he borrows. We just need a signature. You've always said you'd help. Across the kitchen, the green metal box with my service record caught the light. I thought of the pink dress still hanging with a tag and the caption under a photo, "Only special people." I will always help, I said. I just won't lie. Nobody's lying, Tara said quickly. We're just bending the box so it fits. They make it impossible for young families otherwise. Boxes keep bolts from rolling under the truck, I said. You said veteran-owned. If I own 51%, I make the calls. That's not what we meant, Eric said. You'd be like a figurehead. It's just paperwork. The clock ticked like a polite woodpecker. I wrote figurehead on my pad and boxed it. Beside it, I wrote VA occupancy and drew a line. Logistics is just asking the next right question. We'll bring the forms tonight, Tara said brightly. We can eat here and fill them out. I'll make that keto spaghetti squash you liked. You didn't like it, I said. You liked that I pretended I did. I set my cup down and felt that steel-colored click calm settling into place. You said something last week I haven't forgotten. Silence, what Eric said softer. Special people, I said. Remember, I do. I let the air sit a second. Then I added the sentence I had saved for when it mattered. Didn't I warn you? Warn us about what Tara snapped pretty gone from her voice. That someday it wouldn't be about love measured in dollars, I said. That someday the transfers would stop. I said it every time I signed something. You didn't hear it because you were listening for the amount. What transfers, Eric said. Mom, no, you're not serious. Come by if you like, I said. Bring everything you think I should sign. I took the phone off speaker and finished like a human being. And bring your best reasons, not the easy ones. After I hung up, the house exhaled. I opened my bank calendar and put a red line through the date the rent sent itself each month. I didn't cancel it yet. I wrote stop in the square instead. Then I called the number a widower at church had pressed into my palm. She does elder law, he'd said. Not because you're old, because you're wise. The receptionist at Whitaker Law took my name and 2 sentences of my story without interrupting and gave me Wednesday at 10. Bring anything you've already signed, she said. Bring your questions, and bring your patience. I sat at the table, opened the green box, and placed my DD 214 on top of the file like a captain placing his cap before he speaks. I didn't feel brave. I felt accurate. There's a difference. It keeps you from mistaking adrenaline for clarity. At 4, Tara texted a thumbs up and a confetti emoji. Draft LLC incoming, so excited. A PDF slid in neat as a pressed uniform. My name sat at the top, Margaret Hale, 51% owner. On the second page, a signature line waited flat as a dare. The timestamp on the filing made my stomach go cold. I put the phone face down, turned to the sink, and washed my hands like I'd touched something that could make me sick. Then I dried them carefully and left the dinner table unset. I was at the bank when they called again. I let it hum in my purse like a trapped bee and smiled at Mr. Jensen instead. He's the branch manager with ties so conservative they might vote a man who has watched me bring in deposit envelopes with careful handwriting for years. He stood when I sat. That's a small thing, but small things are how you keep humans from turning into transactions. Morning, Mrs. Hale, he said. How can we help? I need to talk about automatic transfers, I said, and I need to put a speed bump in front of my accounts. He nodded once the way a man nods when he already knows the weather. Let's start with the transfers. We pulled up the screen. It was all there like a polite confession. Eric rent, $500 monthly. Grocery help, $200 as needed. Eric car sporadic but generous in January. Numbers that looked innocent because they arrived one by one like snowflakes that only turn into a drift after you try to open the door. I'm pressing pause, I said. I'll give you a written note. And I'd like a verbal password on all withdrawals and changes to be given only in person by me with ID. He tapped, adjusted his glasses, tapped again. Done. If anyone calls, we say there's a password. If anyone pretends to be you, they'll discover they aren't. Print me the last 3 years of transfers, I asked. I like paper that can't be edited when I'm not looking. He smiled without showing teeth. Me too. The printer whirred, and he stapled every month with square corners. He slid the stack across the desk as if he were handing over weather reports I'd already lived through. Anything else, he asked. I'd like you to note this, I said, careful. My son and his wife may attempt to access my funds by persuasion. They do not have permission. If that changes, it will be in writing through my attorney. He typed that sentence like it was a fence post. My phone stopped buzzing. When it started again, he glanced at the purse and then back at me. We can hold a room if you need privacy, he said. I've had too much privacy, I said. What I need is daylight. I signed the pause, initialed. The password shook his hand. He stood again when I did. On the way out, I bought a roll of stamps from the teller window, because you should not only leave banks with less money. At the hardware store, the bell over the door tried to sound cheerful. Mr. Summers looked up from a display of bungee cords. He has sold me furnace filters and picture hooks for a decade. Afternoon, Ms. Hale, he said. What are we fixing? Locks, I said, and a doorbell camera. Something easy to install if a person can follow directions and ignore her arthritic thumb. He picked 3 deadbolts off a pegboard like apples and set a video doorbell in the pile. You'll want long screws for the strike plates, he said, and you'll sleep better if you put 'em in. Ethan, his son, came out from the back with a box cutter. He's the kind boy who says ma'am to women who could be his grandmother without sounding like he's doing them a favor. If you want us to install the camera, he said, I've got a 4 o'clock. We can do locks too if the plates line up. Do it, I said. My door has seen enough of the world. On the way home, I stopped at the print and ship place and bought 2 3-inch binders and a set of index tabs. There is no problem that a tab cannot make kinder. I labeled the spines in block letters, Rent Food Misc. Then I made one more, LLC Legal. I slid the bank printouts into page protectors until the stack sat there like a textbook you wish you'd read sooner. Then I brewed coffee that could wake a mule and began to tally. I wrote numbers with commas not to dramatize, but to keep from making the kind of mistake that costs dignity. At 3:30, Eric texted a half sentence that sounded like an apology limping. Tara sent a photo of a spaghetti squash under a caption, Dinner at 6. We'll bring forms. Triple exclamation marks are what you use when you don't have any other arguments left. I had choir at 6:30. I wrote that back. Busy, I said. Attorney at 10 tomorrow. I watched the typing bubbles appear, disappear, reappear like minnows that can't commit to a direction. Ethan came at 4. He worked quiet, efficient, with a pencil behind his ear like his father. He showed me the app on my phone and didn't talk down to me about it. When motion's detected, it'll notify, he said. You can talk through it if you don't want to open the door. I do a lot of my best talking with doors closed, I said. Ellen walked over at 5 with a Pyrex of something that steamed mercy. Thought you might need a real dinner, she said. I heard a drill. Locks, I said, and a camera. She nodded like that made the same good sense as seatbelts. We ate at my little table with the oilcloth I've had since Reagan, and I told her enough of the story to be honest, without turning the evening into a court transcript. She put her hand on my wrist. Boundaries aren't unchristian, she said, somehow reading my little Ohio catechism of guilt. Sometimes they're the only way to tell the truth with love. At choir, Deacon Ruiz passed out music and gave me a look we saved for the pews behind us when someone coughs through a solo. You okay? He asked later, head bent toward the alto section. Drawing lines, I said. Good, he said. Our Lord drew in the dirt before he spoke. Buy yourself time, then say the sentence that matters. When I got home, I found a PDF waiting in my email box with the subject line, Final LLC, ready for signature. They had moved the furniture while I was at rehearsal. My name sat there again. Margaret Hale, 51% owner, only this time the timestamp told the worst of it. They had filed it already. The signature line waited not as an invitation, but as a trapdoor. The operating agreement promised me guidance and mentorship and no day-to-day responsibilities, which is a long sentence that means you're responsible for everything. We decide. I forwarded the document to the address on a business card in my purse. Paula Whitaker, attorney at law. The reception reply dinged back, "We'll be ready at 10. I made one more pot of coffee because ceremony matters when courage is a habit you have to practice. Then I opened the LLC legal binder and slipped the printout into the first sleeve. I labeled the tab LLC unauthorized. I wrote the date. I wrote underlined fraud. Then I closed the binder and stacked it on top like a shield. They knocked at 7:19. I didn't open the door. The camera showed Tara smiling big and toothy in the kind of way a person smiles at a landlord through a peephole. Eric stood behind her with a Tupperware and eyes that couldn't pick a direction. Mom Tara called honey thick. We brought dinner. I just ate, I said through the speaker. Choir. We can talk quick, she trilled. Just sign so we don't lose the stall. It's time sensitive. The only thing I signed tonight is a hymn, I said. I surprised myself by not laughing. I was calmer than sleep. Tomorrow at 10, my attorney will reach out. Attorney Eric said, voice small. Mom, why? Because you filed using my name before you got my yes, I said. That's not a family favor. That's a legal problem. Tara's smile frayed. You're overreacting. It's just paperwork. Paperwork is how people go to jail without ever touching a gun, I said. She swore under her breath, then pasted the smile back like wallpaper over damp. Fine. Tomorrow. They left the spaghetti squash on the porch. I took it inside because food is food, and I refused to teach myself to be wasteful just to make a point. I set it in the fridge and wrote a sticky note to throw it out in 3 days if necessary, which is sometimes how reconciliation works. I slept like a clean conscience, wrapped in a thrift store quilt. At 9:58 the next morning, I was in a chair across from a woman in a navy suit who looked like she could quote both the revised code and a pie crust recipe. Paula shook my hand, sat, and listened. When I slid the binder across, she smiled at the tabs the way a home cook smiles at mise en place. This is good, she said, flipping. Receipts are love letters to your future self. She read the LLC first front to back the way mechanics listen to a belt before they touch it. You did not consent, she said. They used your name, your veteran status, and your goodwill to create an instrument that shifts risk to you and control to them. We'll send a cease and desist, notify the Secretary of State, and file to dissolve on the grounds of fraud and lack of consent. We'll also notify the city market program so your name can't be used as a skeleton key. She explained words I'd heard on TV and never owned, elder financial exploitation guardianship power of attorney, how they can be tools or crowbars depending on who holds them. We put your refusal in writing, she said. We put your boundaries on paper so no one can pretend they didn't hear them. While she spoke, the receptionist brought in a small tray with coffee and a dish of mints, like this were just another Wednesday in America, which it was. When we finished, Paula printed 2 letters and slid a pen across. We'll send these certified, she said. Sunlight and signatures. That's how we keep wolves honest. Driving home. I felt something I hadn't felt in months, the comfort of a road you've driven your whole life. I parked, gathered my purse and the binder, and was halfway to the porch when a county sedan eased to the curb. A woman stepped out with a badge clipped to her cardigan and a folder tucked under her arm. Good morning, ma'am, she said kindly. Adult Protective Services. We received a wellness concern about you. Do you have a minute to talk? The woman on my sidewalk had the gentle, practiced smile of someone who walks into strangers' lives with a clipboard and good intentions. The badge on her cardigan read, Franklin. Behind her, the county sedan ticked as it cooled. It was a bright Ohio morning. May I see your ID? I asked. Of course. She held it steady. Ms. Franklin, Adult Protective Services. We received a wellness concern. I just want to make sure you're safe and have what you need. I took my time reading the plastic, then looked at her face again. Still kind, still professional. I'll talk with you, I said, but I'd like my attorney present. She's nearby. No problem. I can wait on the porch. I unlocked the new deadbolt and motioned to the swing. The doorbell camera blinked. Inside, I called Paula. County's here, I said. I'm 2 miles out. Don't answer questions yet. Don't refuse either. I'll be right there. By the time two waters sweated, Paula's navy suit was coming up the walk. She shook Ms. Franklin's hand, exchanged cards, and sat beside me like this had always been the plan. Ms. Hale is happy to cooperate, Paula said, and I'm here to ensure the scope stays appropriate. No court order in play. Correct, Ms. Franklin said. This is a wellness check based on a family report. Paula nodded. Then we'll keep it conversational. The questions were reasonable, which is sometimes harder than rude. Reasonable asks you to prove you're normal. Ms. Franklin asked about my doctor, my routine, how I handle money, who I see. I answered without embroidery. The binder sat on the coffee table like a witness that doesn't interrupt. May I see the kitchen and where you keep medications? She asked. Paula glanced at me. I nodded. Yes, I consent. We did the slow tour older houses deserve. In the kitchen, canned goods lined like little soldiers, eggs and greens, in the fridge, Ellen's casserole. On the counter, vitamins, aspirin, a blood pressure cuff that glares if you skip a day. Prescription meds, she asked. None, I said. My doctor says I'm stubborn and boring. She smiled and made a note. Bedroom made laundry folded. In the bathroom, grab bars polished and firm. She checked water, heat, smoke alarms. No prying, just diligence. Back in the living room, Paula slid the LLC packet across. For the record, she said, Ms. Hale's son and daughter-in-law filed business documents using her veteran status and name without consent. She stopped automatic transfers and retained counsel. We have contemporaneous records. Ms. Franklin read silently. The report mentions paranoia and sudden isolation, she said. New locks and a doorbell camera, I said, after an unauthorized filing and several pressured visits. I still sing in choir Tuesdays, church Sundays. Coffee with my neighbor Ellen 3 mornings a week. I'm drawing boundaries, not curtains. As if summoned by the truth, the doorbell chimed. On the screen, Ellen stood with my empty loaf pan and a bag of tomatoes big as hearts. I can come back, she said, when I cracked the door and she saw company. Please, I said, this is Ms. Franklin. Ellen sat, smoothed her skirt, and told the kind of facts that make a story stand up straight. She walks every morning, unless it's ice, Ellen said. Drives fine, plants flowers, brings cookies on her week. We talk on the porch like clockwork. A minute later, Deacon Ruiz tapped the frame and leaned in. Brought the new hymn list, he said, then took in the room. You all need coffee. He set the sheet down and added plain, She's fine. She told me last night she was drawing lines. I told her Jesus drew in the dirt first. Ms. Franklin took it in the tomatoes hymn list binder. Then she asked for the 2 pieces of paper that tell more fact than story. May I see your identification and last month's bank statement? Driver's license, veteran card. Jensen's neat staples on the printouts. Paula pointed out the note about a verbal password on the account. Ms. Franklin nodded at the simple protections built like handrails, not paranoia design. Ms. Hale, she said, are you afraid of your son? I'm afraid of what money does to good people when they think no one's watching, I said. I love my son. I don't love what he's letting himself want. She let that sit. Do you want services, housekeeping meals, transportation? I want you to know I'm all right, I said. And I want a record that says no one has permission to access my money but me. Paula added, we'll provide a letter you can attach to the file. She closed her folder and set her pen like a period. I appreciate your cooperation. I see no indicators today that you're at risk. I'll close this as unsubstantiated and note the legal concerns. Then she did something decent. She apologized. I'm sorry for the disruption, Ms. Hale. We take family reports seriously. Some are smoke, some are fire. Today was smoke. Better to knock than assume, I said. She shook hands, admired Ellen's tomatoes, and left as quietly as she'd come. When the sedan turned the corner, the house exhaled. Ellen squeezed my shoulder. Come by later, she said. There's pie. After they left, I stood in the hallway and rested my palm on the glass over Robert's trifold flag. Civilian life doesn't ask for salutes. It asks for steadiness. I pressed my forehead to the frame and said to the man who taught me not to flinch, I'm all right. In the afternoon, the doorbell chimed again, brisk official. On the mat, a certified envelope with green and white stickers. My name block printed, return address, the Clark County Probate Court. I didn't open it on the porch. I carried it to the table, breathed once, and slid a knife under the flap. Petition for guardianship, it read. Petitioners Eric Hale and Tara Hale. I laid the paper down like something that could bite and picked up the phone. Paula, I said when she answered, we've graduated. Paula came over within the hour. She didn't waste time on outrage. Useful anger is a tool, not a mood. We sat at my table with the certified envelope open between us like a storm map. She read pen tapping once at the signature lines. Petition for guardianship, she said. They're alleging cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, isolation, and susceptibility to influence. 3 witness statements attached. She slid the attachments across. The first was from a neighbor across the street, Mr. Davis, who does not so much dislike me as dislike anything that isn't him. He'd written that I'd installed surveillance and had strange men coming and going at all hours, which in his world meant Ethan with a drill and a locksmith on a Tuesday. The second was a statement from my pharmacist signed to the best of my knowledge that described irregular medication purchases and non-compliance, which would have been damning if I took any medication at all. The third was from Tara. It read like a small-town funeral eulogy for a woman who had lost her mind. She cries on paper, Paula said flatly. We'll deal with each. I poured coffee because ceremony steadies hands. What comes next? We prepare, she said. We counter with fact. First, we schedule an independent capacity evaluation, Dr. Evelyn Moore. She's thorough and kind. Paula glanced up. It won't be demeaning. It will be clinical memory problem-solving financial comprehension. It's how we prove what we already know. I nodded relief and irritation wedged in the same breath. The idea that I had to prove I was still me made my jaw set. But logistics doesn't argue with the weather. It adjusts the route. Second, she went on. We gather affidavits. Mr. Jensen can attest to your consistent intentional financial activity and the new verbal password on the account. Ellen can attest to routine self-care and social connections. Deacon Ruiz can attest to your participation and clarity. And we'll get a clarifying statement from the pharmacist. I suspect he signed something he didn't understand. She tucked the petition back into the envelope and tapped it once with the pen. Third, we unwind the LLC. Cease and desist goes out today. Filing to dissolve for lack of consent goes out tomorrow. We also notify the City Market Program there is no authorized veteran-owned application bearing your name. If they see anything, they freeze it. Sunlight and signatures, I said, remembering her line from yesterday. She smiled. Exactly. After she left, I set up my house like a staging area. I labeled new tabs capacity, eval, affidavits, court. I stapled a copy of the petition to the front of the court section and underlined the parts that made me snort. Isolation, for example, when all I'd done was stop paying for dinners where I wasn't invited to speak. Paranoia when I'd installed the same doorbell half my street had. If they wanted to turn my steadiness into symptoms, they'd have to do it under lights. At 4, I drove to the pharmacy. Mr. Green went red as a stop sign when I asked about the statement with his name. Mrs. Hale, oh boy, he said, rubbing his forehead. Your daughter-in-law came in worried about you. She asked what medications you were on. I told her vitamins and occasional aspirin. She said that was proof you weren't taking care of your health. Then she asked me to sign a generic form confirming irregular medication purchases. I thought it was insurance. I didn't read it like I should have. That's on me. Can you fix it, I asked. Not angry, just schedules and shipments. I'll write a corrective affidavit today, he said. It will state you have no prescription meds, that you purchase vitamins appropriately, and that any previous statement was an error. I'll notarize it next door. Thank you, I said. He bagged my multivitamins like they were medicine for the whole street. On my way home, I slowed as I passed Mr. Davis's house. He was in his lawn chair with a beer tucked on the arm like it had a deed. He squinted across the street and shouted, You got men crawling around your place all week. Look suspicious. Locks and a camera, I said easy, so you can keep hollering at yours without worrying who hears. He snorted. Nosy is nosy. I kept driving. Some folks need the last word because they can't hold the first thought steady. Back at the table, the phone buzzed with Mr. Jensen's email. He attached a one-page statement on bank letterhead, summarizing the transfers I'd paused and the password now required for any changes. Ms. Hale has always demonstrated clarity and consistency in her financial decisions, he wrote. It read like weather again, the kind you can rely on. Ellen came by with a pen and a pie and the willingness to sign where Paula's template told her. I'll say the truth, she said. You walk, you eat, you laugh, you show up. You bake better banana bread than me, and anyone who says otherwise can fight me in the Kroger parking lot. Please don't fight anyone, I said, though. The image cheered me. At 6, the church phone tree kicked in as Deacon called to confirm Sunday's anthem. When I explained briefly about affidavits, he cleared his throat. I'll say what I've seen, he said. I've seen you read music, keep time, comfort widows, and stack chairs without complaining. I've seen nothing confused but our soprano section when the tenors wander. That night I ironed because some habits don't go bad. I pulled my old dress jacket from the cedar closet. The wool held the faint scent of naphthalene and parades. I laid a towel on the table, set the iron to low, and smoothed the front. I didn't plan to wear it to court like a costume. I wasn't theater. I was a record of service, of patience, of a woman who knows how to hold her tongue until it's time to use it. When the jacket lay flat, I hung it back up, not on a hook of nostalgia, but on a peg of calm. Then I made a grilled cheese, the way Robert used to mayonnaise on the outside, for the crisp a trick he swore by, and ate it over the sink like a contented sinner. In the morning, I met Dr. Moore in an office that smelled like lemons and well-worn books. She shook my hand, explained every step, and never once spoke to me like I had left the room. We did memory tasks, simple math, a little logic, a little drawing. She asked about my finances. What happens if we stop a recurring transfer? What is the effect on your budget? Who decides? I answered, like I was explaining shelving to a corporal. After she looked me in the eye and said, I don't give results the same day, but I can say this, you've been clear throughout. Clear is my love language, I said. On my way out, my phone lit with a call. Tara. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered, because avoidance is not the same as boundary. Mom, she said, voice sanded down to soft, we're about to lose the market stall if you don't sign. It's our shot. We'll do the work. You'll never have to lift a finger. Please. I listened to her breathe. In my mind, I saw the pink dress with the tag still hanging. I saw the caption, only special people. I saw Ms. Franklin's clipboard, Paula's pen, Mr. Green's red ears, Mr. Jensen's staple, Ellen's tomatoes, Deacon's hymn list. Then I saw the door to my own house with a lock I'd chosen and a camera I controlled. I heard you, I said. Thank you for asking. What does that mean? She said, panic hid poorly in sugar. It means I heard you, I repeated and hung up. 15 minutes later, there was a knock. I watched through the camera as Tara shifted from foot to foot, a folder hugged to her chest like a baby that could buy its own diapers. I didn't open the door. I didn't speak through the box. I let the knock sit in the air until it understood it wasn't owed an answer. When she finally left, I wrote a single line on my legal pad and underlined it twice. I do not sign what I do not own. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and paper passed through careful hands. Paula and I stood when the judge entered. Across the aisle, Eric and Tara sat with a lawyer whose suit said billable hours. I felt the old reflex rise, chin-steady shoulders, square breath, saved for the sentence that matters. Opposing counsel went first, framing loving children, alarmed by a sudden decline with words like vulnerable and isolated. He read from Mr. Davis about surveillance and strange men from a pharmacist's first note on irregular purchases, and from Tara describing me as changed overnight. Paula didn't spin a counter-story. She stacked facts. Adult Protective Services, cooperative, unsubstantiated, closed. Bank letter 3 years of intentional transfers, a deliberate pause, a verbal password. Capacity evaluation scores, above average clear competence. Then the document that made the room lean forward, the LLC listing me as 51% owner, filed without my signature. Your Honor, Paula said, voice level as a workbench, this is not confusion. This is a woman setting boundaries. The petition seeks access, not protection. The judge examined the LLC the way a man checks lumber for rot. Mrs. Hale, did you authorize this filing? No, Your Honor, I said. I was sent the document after it was filed. And the message about only veterans are eligible. The bailiff projected a screenshot. Tara's text filled the screen. My reply sat beneath it. The judge read it, then set the paper down. They called Tara. She wore black and cried well. She described the mother-in-law I had been kind, generous, and the stranger I had become paranoid, manipulated. Paula's cross was a checklist. When was the last time you called my client without asking for money? No date. Did you tell her only special people were invited silence? Did you file an LLC listing her as majority owner before she signed? Tara said there was a deadline, a placeholder. Placeholders read TBD, Paula said. They don't read Mom's identity. Mr. Davis testified about men with tools and me yelling through a robot. He had never spoken to me, owned his own door camera, and couldn't name the strange men. That ended quickly. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, explained he had signed a generic form after Tara asked about irregular purchases, thinking it was for insurance. Then he read his corrective affidavit. I have no prescription medications. I buy vitamins as needed. Any earlier implication was in error. Asked if anyone influenced him, he said the records did. Eric testified last. He spoke about grilled cheese and my generosity then about rugs pulled and obligations due. Paula stood for 3 questions. How much money did your mother transfer to you and your wife over 3 years? I don't know the exact number. Paula held up the bank summary. Does $33,400 sound wrong? He swallowed. It could be. How many visits to your mother's home in that time did not involve asking for or receiving money or goods? He stared at his hands. I don't know. Did you ask your mother to be on a loan by representing she would occupy a condo she did not intend to occupy? It's how people do it, he said. The word is misrepresentation, Paula said and sat. Our side went quickly. Mr. Jensen described my banking patterns and the password now in place. Ellen told the court about porch coffees, morning walks, and Tuesday choir. Deacon Ruiz spoke to reliability and the conversation about boundaries. Paula filed the APS note unsubstantiated and an email withdrawing and disavowing any market application in my name. Opposing counsel's closing leaned on what-ifs. Capacity is not a single afternoon, Your Honor. Even if she tests well, we fear for her long-term safety. Paula's rebuttal fit in a paragraph. Older adults do not owe their children their bank accounts, she said. Ms. Hales locks door, camera bank password, and counsel are safety by design, not decline. Petitioners seek control, not care. The judge removed his glasses. Guardianship is a serious remedy, he said. It protects. It does not transfer convenience. He tapped the LLC. Mrs. Hale did not authorize the use of her identity or veteran status. Petitioners asked her to lend that status to a business she would not control, and to a loan requiring a false occupancy statement. She responded by pausing transfers, securing counsel, and cooperating with Adult Protective Services. The capacity evaluation finds her competent. The bank confirms a coherent history. The court finds no basis for guardianship. He looked at Eric and Tara. The petition is denied with prejudice. Remove Mrs. Hale's name from any filings or applications to which she has not consented. Any future attempt to access her accounts or file documents in her name without written permission may be referred for investigation. Do not contact Adult Protective Services again without new credible information. The gavel sounded like a cupboard closing quiet final. Air returned to the room. I felt a load set down on the right pallet finally. In the hallway, life went on copier chatter, a map to the vending machines. Tara walked past without looking. Eric lingered. Mom, he said, voice frayed. We're family. We are, I said. That's why I raised you to stand on your own 2 feet. What if I fall? You'll learn how to land, I said. If I keep standing in your place, you won't. He nodded once, the small nod a man uses when the ground has shifted, and he knows it. Outside, the Ohio sky looked ordinary, which felt right. Paula touched my elbow. Home, she asked. Home, I said, and held the door for an older couple with birth certificates in a manila folder. He tipped his cap. We stepped into the light like regular people who had just done something regular and right. I didn't celebrate that afternoon. I put things away. Paula drove me home, and we stood in my kitchen with coats still on like travelers who aren't sure the trip is finished. She spread her file across the table, and we made a short, decent list change, beneficiaries, and will. Add a letter of intent that says no powers of attorney without counsel. Send the dissolution and disavowal notices on the LLC. Log today's ruling in the binder. It felt a little like restocking a shelf after a storm, quiet labor labels straight. Tomorrow, Paula said, we'll record the court order and send certified copies to anyone who might get creative. Sunlight and signatures, I said. She smiled and buttoned her coat. Get some sleep, Maggie. You did everything right. After she left, the house sounded like a church, after the last hymn benches, empty light, soft air that remembers voices. I hung my coat on the back of a chair like I might need to leave again, and then didn't. I made tea. I stood by the window and watched the maple hold onto 5 stubborn leaves, as if the tree had its own boundaries to practice. On the counter, the pink dress I'd never worn lay folded in its bag. I slid it out and held it to my shoulders. It was pretty in a way that asked for cameras. I set it on the chair with my coat and wrote myself a note donate to the church thrift. Hope is good. But I wanted intention hanging in my closet, not costumes. The next morning I went to Paula's office with a small stack of decisive papers. We updated the will. We added a paragraph in my own voice that says plainly that gifts are choices, not obligations, and that my money is not to be managed by anyone who believes love is a ledger. She printed it. I signed. 2 witnesses signed. A notary pressed her square stamp like a seal on an envelope I was finally ready to send to the future. Back home, I drove to the Veterans Pantry on Limestone and unloaded 2 cases of canned goods and a bag of socks because socks are dignity when winter thinks it has you cornered. The volunteer at the door knew my face from church dinners and thanked me like I had invented kindness. We could use you on Saturdays, she said. I'll bring a ladle and a smile, I said. And a label maker if you let me close to the shelves. That afternoon, an email slid in from the city market office, polite as a librarian. Please confirm your veteran-owned application. Paula had already forwarded our disavowal, but bureaucracy walks slower than rumor. I replied with a sentence that felt like washing a floor and watching the water run clear. No application is authorized in my name. Any filing bearing my identity is fraudulent. See attached order. I CC'd Paula, the program manager, and my own printer. I made soup for myself, a thing I forget to do when I'm feeding everyone else's emergencies. I ate it with crackers over a crossword and folded the paper when I finished like I'd finished a chapter. Sometime after dusk, my phone lit with a voicemail from Eric. No ask, no apology either. Just a man's voice trying on responsibility, like a stiff new jacket. Mom, I took an extra route this week. We'll make rent. I'll call you Sunday. I pressed the phone to my chest and let the message sit there like a warm plate. A thing you don't scarf down. A thing you let feed you slow. Then I wrote on my yellow pad Sunday to a 4-door, open for visits with no asks. I underlined it once. Boundaries are doors with hours. Love is the sign that says what they are. On Friday, I changed the porch light for a brighter bulb because good light is cheap safety. Ellen came over with cuttings from my windowsill and a pie cooling on a wire rack. We talked about birds that refuse to migrate and neighbors who decorate early. We didn't say Eric or Tara. We talked about tomatoes and hymns and the kind of grocery list you write when it's only you and you're allowed to like pears. On Sunday, I took my seat in the alto row and sang harmonies that don't shout but hold the middle. Deacon Ruiz winked at me on the downbeat. After service, I poured coffee for the line of people who tell the same jokes every week and the griefs that rotate like casseroles. A woman new to town touched my arm. You look like you have a calm kitchen, she said, a funny thing to say to a stranger. I did not tell her about petitions or passwords. I told her where the good thrift store is and when the bus runs best. At home, I pulled the green metal box from the shelf and set it beside the blue one like old friends after a long day. I slid a copy of the court order behind my DD 214. I labeled the last tab in my binder closed and felt the satisfying click of rings catching paper. Then I did the thing that feels like resistance in a life that taught me to be useful. I took a nap with the windows cracked and the fan turning and no phone within reach. When I woke up, the house smelled like ordinary. I made grilled cheese with mayonnaise on the outside Robert's way and laughed softly when the bread hissed like applause. I ate at the table. I wrote 2 letters. I may or may not mail one to Eric, saying I will listen on Sundays if he can talk without invoices. One to Tara, saying there is a world where we could cook together again, but in that world, honesty is the only seasoning. Late, I stood on the porch and watched the streetlights declare their small dominion over the block. The camera blinked once. A cat decided I wasn't interesting and moved on. I thought about the text, "Only veterans are eligible," and how that turned out to be truer than she meant. It wasn't a stall or a condo that required a veteran. It was this quiet fight, this discipline, this refusal to lie for love, this training that taught me not to flinch when a form tries to turn a person into a plan. If you are listening to this, and some part of it feels like your kitchen, if your table has hosted requests that taste like gratitude on the way in and debt on the way out, write 1 sentence on paper and put a square next to it. I do not sign what I do not own. Or my help is a gift, not a pipeline. Or boundaries are love wearing work boots. Then tell 1 person who will stand in your doorway and nod when you need it. If this story helped you steady your hands, share it with someone who needs to hear a calm voice. If you want more stories like this, ordinary women doing the not-so-ordinary thing of telling the truth, stay close. I'll be here on Sundays, humming alto a pot on the stove, a light on the porch.